Donna Pokere-Phillips, it's lovely to talk to you. I'm looking forward to meeting you in person one day. But today is not such a lovely day. It's not such a great moment because I spoke to you yesterday and I heard a very stressed, worried woman who is ringing around everybody saying, help. So let's go into that story. Why do you need help? What is the issue? And who would you love help from right now? What's the issue, first of all?
Well, we have a whare tupuna, which is a homestead that's 104 years old. We also have a whare puni, which is a smaller marae that's 170 years old. And the issue, it's been an ongoing issue. It's a whānau issue, but it's an issue between whānau and Ahu Whenua Trust, which is a Māori land trust that manages our farm. So my auntie...
And we're talking New Plymouth here, aren't we? The New Plymouth area.
We're talking Taranaki. So just out of New Plymouth, heading south is Opanaki, and just past Opanaki is Pihama, and then Pihama is our farm.
Right. And so back...
Tupuna whenua, yeah.
Yes, beautiful. So back to your auntie. How long had she lived there, Donna?
All her life. So she's in her late 60s. I don't know exactly how old she is. Auntie, I'm sorry if I've aged you, but she's in her late 60s and she's been there all her life. And what had happened yesterday is the trust evicted her out of her home. So there are two buildings, but they are joined together because the Māori, or the Māori room as the whānau call it, but the whare puni, our tupuna built the homestead around the whare puni. So they're like Siamese twins.
Yes.
But they're both over 100 years old. So the homestead itself is 104 years old. And the whare puni, which was built in the 18th century, is 170 years old.
There's a huge story about the whare puni. It goes right back through your tupuna, through your ancestors who helped build it. I want to deal with your auntie first. She's in her 60s, and she was literally bailiffed out of this house. The bailiffs turned up, the police turned up. It's unbearable to think of this. They threw her out at that age of her whare, and she was, her things were all over the ground outside, weren't they? That was horrifying. That's horrifying.
But what I've noticed, especially in the last year, is that legal due processes have gone out the window because the government doesn't respect mine and yours Bill of Rights and human rights.
Exactly.
I've found that court processes do not respect them as well. So she was sent, because it's a Māori issue, this issue should have been held in the Māori Land Court. But the trust knew that they would have problems if they went to the proper jurisdiction. We, last year, managed to push back on the tenancy tribunal issue, saying it was the wrong jurisdiction to deal with this issue, that is actually a tikanga issue. So when we pushed back, the kaumātua of Ngā Ruahine put a rāhui over the property. So there's been a rāhui over the property for a number of years, which meant no one could come in, because what had happened a few years ago is the trust decided that they wanted to demolish the homestead and the whare puni. And so that's where the angst, the tension between whānau and trust happened. So you're talking about Māori corporate elite versus ordinary whānau here.
There's a huge story about the whare puni, but this is an essential issue to first get across to all Kiwis to understand. I have known from my Māori friends that there is this sense within Māoridom that we have, and we're all Kiwis, but we have in the Pākehā world that a few elites, a few greedy elites, I'm going to say, have taken over and are making decisions up there and not consulting the rest of us. And that's something that's gone wrong in New Zealand across the board. Are you saying within Māoridom, it is like that? Because that's what my Māori friends are saying. We haven't asked for three waters. We haven't asked for all of these decisions that are causing such angst across the country. There hasn't been proper consultation. There are a few corporate types up there making these decisions. Is that too big a bow to pull?
Well, I believe personally, and because I have a legal background, I hold a master's in law, and I'm not saying this to as we say in Māoridom, the kumara never says how sweet it is. I'm sharing this. I'm sharing this because I want people to know that I do understand legal processes and I do understand constitutional processes. And where I believe this elitism stems from, the core area that it stems from is through treaty settlements. So, and I don't call them treaty settlements because they weren't a negotiation. I've been involved in that process. They're not negotiations. Basically, the Crown says, this is it, take it or leave it. You may be able to push out a little bit further than that, but basically the Crown comes in with a package, and that's pretty much what you get. And if you look at what that's worth, it's worth from a Māoridom economic perspective, it's worth 2 cents in the dollar, those settlements. So when the rest of Aotearoa, New Zealand, think that we've bankrupt the country, well, we haven't. We've been bankrupted, and it's just what the tribes are doing. They're trying to grow that 2 cents in the dollar, and I must say settlement has been successful. However, to cement that process, the Crown has to agree to the entity, and the entity is that structure, which is the elite structure, whereas Māoridom tikanga is that structure. So the leader is the one propping up the people, whereas a European structure, you have the few elites at the top. So the settlement process, and so in Taranaki, for example, we just had the last settlement of Ngāti Māori. So all our iwi in Taranaki have settled. Most iwi in Aotearoa have settled, and they've created that structure. So if I can just share, the Crown created an iwi structure. True Māori governance sits in hapu. So hapu, which is marae, and a collective of marae, which are all interrelated, create a hapu, and that is our true traditional governance base. Now, the Crown created iwi. Now, there was iwi back in the day, but an iwi means a collective of hapu coming together for times usually of war.
Wow.
And so when that happens, when they come together, when that crisis is over, then they dismantle coming together, and they move back into their hapu governance. Whereas the new structure through settlement has created a corporate structure, an iwi structure, where only a few make decisions on the majority for the many. With a trust, however, a Māori Ahuwhenua Trust that is managed under Te Ture Whenua Māori Act, it is whānau whenua, or whānau land, and so out of that whānau, you choose who the trustees are. Back in the days, most Māori land were managed by the government under the Māori Trustees Act. And then Māori said, we want to govern our own whenua. And so Te Ture Whenua in 1993 was created to allow us to govern our own whenua. But because of that iwi structure, that through settlement, that structure has worked.
Yes.
For Māori. If you understand what I'm saying.
It is a brilliant explanation. so many Kiwis, especially since Wellington, are saying we don't need these people in Wellington telling us all what to do. We don't need this government overreach. In fact, we barely need centralized government. Let's go back to small communities of Māori and Pakeha brothers and sisters, all working together around the country. How do we constitutionally get there? But what you've explained is the exact model that we need, how Māori used to run it. Isn't that beautiful? Another thing we can learn together, side by side, as equally loving people, as equal people. There's a much deeper, richer conversation to be had in the future about this, because I find that fascinating. So we need these hapu or mycelium structures, these little nodules around the country, so no centralized dictator can do this. However, let's now take it to the specific issue that is of urgency, and it's arisen from this corporate few within your wider grouping dictating. And what happens when there's power? So often it goes to the heads of the few, and they can misuse it unless they're very, very wise. And not many of our leaders are showing wisdom. So what has happened? How has this come about that this auntie of yours was thrown out? And how can we help protect this lovely little, it's a traveler's whare, isn't it, really? Explain the little whare that is within the house. It's almost to me like if Māori are on a kind of pilgrimage towards the larger marae, there's their place for the night. Have I got that right, Donna?
That's exactly what a wharepuni is. So it's on whānau whenua, or it would have been, and back in the old days there would have been a bigger marae closer, but these are the little community groups. And Whanganui and our whānau from Pōneke, Wellington, used to travel up to Pariaka. So Pariaka is just around the corner from our homestead and from our whenua. And so they used to travel up, and along the way, not just our wharepuni, but along the way there'll be wharepuni. And so they were like stop-off motels.
before you had Pakeha, before you had motels ever. But we're not talking, come and have a bed and lie down. We are talking a room that your great-grandfather and your grandfather worked to build beautifully with what's inside the walls. What does it look like in there?
Well, the wharepuni itself would have been built by their ancestors. The homestead was built by my great-grandfather, by his hands, and my great-great-grandfather. But the wharepuni would have been built by their tupuna. So the wharepuni has a longer history than the actual homestead. The actual homestead looks like a modern, not a modern, a villa. So it looks like a whare. But the Māori room inside, and I've shown people on my lives, it's made out of raupo and reed. It's all natural material. An engineer did a report in 2015, said the homestead, which is 104 years old, was used with more modern material, asbestos. Apparently, they assume asbestos is involved. Because it was made of more modern material, it deteriorated faster than the 170 of wharepuni, and the engineer said the wharepuni could continue for another 100 years as is.
That's incredible. So it was built to last maybe close to 300 years. That's incredible. Yeah. That's an incredible building. Boy, doesn't that tell the government, if you want to build housing, that's really good. How about
we go back to traditional material?
We have so much to learn. So much to learn. So this beautiful little rest place that's an historic site, it really should be that. What's going to happen to it, Donna, if they get away with doing what they want to do? What, are they going to ship it off the land, put it somewhere historical, or worse, are they going to pull it down?
No, they're going to demolish it, but you use the word ship. They're going to demolish it, and they started demolishing it on Thursday. As soon as they evicted, but they manhandled. There was the police, there were security guards, there were the trust, and there were other whānau there. And they literally threw my auntie out on the road, and they threw all her gears out onto the ground outside. It was appalling. We Kaumatua were there, whānau were there for her. Kaumatua tried to get back into the whare, because what Māori do is that if we feel that there's been an injustice done, or we're trying to protect what we call a wahitapu, and it's a wahitapu, so a sacred site or a sacred building, and someone wants to destroy that, and a lot of people around Aotearoa would see occupation, and we call that a noho. A noho means that you sit in, it is a protest, it's a bit like Wellington, an occupation. You sit in and you occupy the land or the taonga that you're trying to protect. And the kaumātua tried to get in to occupy the wharepuni, because they already started to demolish the homestead. They were pulling out windows. Now the issue here is, one, the way that they treated my auntie; two, that there was a rāhui put over only the kaumātua. So there's all this tikanga and kawa, and only the kaumātua can lift the rāhui.
And the kaumātua, the elder, has put the rāhui, it's like a ban to say nothing will go on this land until things are settled. And tikanga, remember, is, for everybody watching, is Māori custom. And this is what this government so pretends to uphold, with lots of Māori words and lots of Māori, everywhere. She's like the queen of it. And when it really comes to it, when it's an issue that really should be put into action, in other words, substance, it's not just the form, this is what they do. They send in police yet again. Police, what are you doing siding with these people who are not listening to the actual people on the ground? How is your aunt, by the way? How is she now, having been traumatized?
She was absolutely traumatized. The kaumātua were traumatized. The kaumātua, I showed a video on my public page on a Pokere-Phillips of them getting manhandled as well, and them trying to get into the whare, how the security guards blocked everyone from getting in. And the security guards can't do that. They can only stand to attention. They cannot physically block people. The security guards can, it's questionable about their role. I know that because I have friends that are security guards, and they saw the video and they said they couldn't do that. So there was, the whole process, there was no due process. So there was a tenancy tribunal a few weeks ago, which my auntie couldn't attend because her mokopuna got COVID. So she had to get tested and isolate. So she rang up the courts to say, I can't attend the tenancy tribunal. Now the tribunal carried on with the tribunal. So when you talk about the rules of law and natural justice, she didn't get that. And then the kaumātua were there. So the kaumātua were able to speak to the tenancy tribunal and explain that this is the wrong jurisdiction, that we need to discuss this issue in the Māori Land Court. But these are the issues that we have. We're trying to protect this wharepuni, because the homestead, you can technically say, is a private property, but the wharepuni belongs to the people.
Yes, absolutely.
And so what had happened is that the tenancy tribunal has to give my auntie a judgment that comes out of that jurisdiction, and an order, if they're going to write up an order. She received nothing. They turned up on Thursday with a bailiff. She was unaware. The security guards, whānau, trailers. We have taonga in that homestead that have been there for over 100 years. We have tonga from the Lizzie Bell. So there's another story, and this story connects to the wider community. The Lizzie Bell was a massive big ship that sunk off the coast, not far from where our wharepuni is. And so the wharepuni in the homestead was used pretty much like a morgue, I guess, for the Lizzie Bell. There's a urupa specifically for the Lizzie Bell and those that had died on the Lizzie Bell. And
a cemetery. There's a cemetery.
Yeah.
An urupa.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So there were tonga that come off the Lizzie Bell that were placed in our whare, and it's because our whānau, our tupuna back in the day did save lives, but it was also used as a morgue. And so there's that wider community connection as well. And my auntie has been kaitiaki over all those tonga. We've got tonga of tupuna. We've got
What
tonga
are
from
they like mere or greenstone, or what are those treasures, those tonga?
All sorts of tonga, Māori tonga, and also tonga from the Lizzie Bell. They came in and they took all those away. So they broke into her whare. She had the key. They marched her out, manhandled her. She locked the house up. They broke into her whare, took all those tonga, never consulted with any of the whānau about those tonga.
And she was recognised as the kaitiaki. She was the recognised guardian of those treasures. That was her role across all the hapu. I'm getting horrible shivers down my spine. You see so many Kiwis, Donna, now from Wellington, and from the egregious breaches of all our rights. Farmers, yes. We're all now realising what it felt like to be colonised by the few, the arrogant few who came and took over the country and didn't consult with your lives, because that is what's happening from the arrogant few who've been voted into power and the corporate world. It's there colonising with the same level of arrogance. It's just horrific. What were you going to say, Donna?
I was just going to say the saddest thing, and it happens in history, is that the oppressed become the oppressor. Mm-hmm. They learn well from the colonizer, and whether or not we've got this in this instance, that's for us to discuss, I guess, and for us to challenge as well. But certainly it wasn't tikanga. Certainly you do not treat a queer like that. Certainly you do not treat your tonga like that. The demolition, there was no karakia. So we do demolish, but there's a tikanga to the demolition. When you demolish a whare to put a new whare up, and you have to bury the whare. There's a whole karakia that goes around that, and then you save certain parts of the whare to put into a new whare. You don't demolish and leave it there. That wharepuni also has a urupa, and that's why it's associated as a marae. Every marae has a urupa. Our wharepuni have our tupuna in that urupa, not far from it. And so by demolishing the wharepuni, you've disassociated yourself with your tupuna connected to that urupa. That wharepuni was the kaitiaki of the urupa. That wharepuni have the souls of our tupuna in it. And so the day that they kicked my auntie out, and it's just about bringing me to tears thinking about it, was the day that they tried to sever our connection to our tupuna, and we're all grieving. We're all going through a mourning process at the moment.
Donna, how is your aunt? She's lost that. She's lost her kaitiaki, her guardianship role. She's lost these tonga that she would have known their sort of soul energy, their energy. But she's also lost her home of 60 plus years. How is she coping?
I think the hardest part for her is that the whānau that moved her out, because there were the trustees who were whānau, and there were whānau there, and she said the hardest part for her was that the whānau that helped move her out, she has lived around all her life. And so this whole lack of respect for tikanga, the whole colonised process, the whole will use the law as a hammer on our whānau, and yet they have acted unlawfully. And the reason why I say that, one is that my auntie has a allodial title, which is a bit like ahika, which she keep the home fires burning to ensure that everyone knows that you belong there. So it's hard to remove ahika. What they did is they used the Pākehā law to remove her ahika. So that's the first part. So now there's going to be a challenge on the ownership or her rights. We don't look at it as ownership, we look at it as kaitiakitanga. So
Yes.
there's going to be a legal challenge. The Pope, the bear, basically, and the bear is me.
We need a lot of mama bears, very, very powerful mama bears in this country. And I don't mean the power that Gunn misuses. We need connected, humane, community-based, powerful mama bears. So good that bear's been poked. But in the meantime, there is a great urgency this weekend. So we're at the end of April now. This will go out even before May. But you have to now use the very clumsy tool of the Pākehā court system, which has not served, because, as you say, we're in an era where they're watching our politicians breach laws all the time, and unless we have, this is an era when our judiciary is showing up either as willing to go along and be corrupted, or willing to stand with great courage and not be corrupted and stand for the right side of the law as well as the right side of history. But it's alarming to see certain judges. There's one whose father, Robin Cook, was a judge that whose judgments I loved reading when I was at law school studying.
Me too. He was absolutely. Out of all the judgments that we learned at law school, I used to read his one, and we all had a lot of reading, but I read his one several times because I was just so into him.
Same. He was kind of a New Zealand Lord Denning, but his son is not. His son is far from that, and there are many people now saying, how could Robin Cook's son go with the government that is breaching the Bill of Rights and human rights everywhere? We do not understand that. None of us understand that. So let's hope that he takes a long, hard look at himself and how he will be remembered. This younger Cook will be remembered if he doesn't clean up his act. But let's go back to, you have to use the Western, the Pākehā law system right now until you can get it in the Māori land court. So what will you get? Seek an injunction? Is that the first thing to stop all this?
Yes. So 4:30 yesterday afternoon, the injunction went through.
Great. Oh, you're a bear I wouldn't be crossing claws with. You're the kind of bear I like. That's brilliant. You've pulled it off, Donna. I'm really, I didn't know that. And then it stops them being able to come in and demolish the whare or the whare puni this weekend. And then what happens from there?
Well, and the other thing is I received an email, so Heritage New Zealand got involved as well, and Heritage New Zealand are investigating the demolition that has happened thus far, and also so Heritage New Zealand is doing an investigation. The injunction went through at 4:30 through to the courts. Haven't heard whether or not a judgment has come out or an order, an injunction has come through, or if anything's happened. But the fact that we got it in there in the first instance sets that process. We didn't get it at 4:30. We got it in at 4:30.
Okay, it's in the system. So this weekend is still imperative. It's very important.
Yes. Okay. But what coming behind it was an email from Heritage New Zealand, and basically says to the trust and the trustees and whoever else is starting to demolish the homestead and the whare puni is to stop. We're doing an investigation. If you have breached, because they're both heritage buildings, if you have breached, there will be prosecutions. So they're doing their thing. We've done our thing. And the third issue is because everybody's made an assumption, and the engineer in 2015 says that he believes there's asbestos in the Homestead, which is 104 years old, that there has to be what they call an asbestos management plan. And so an asbestos, so there's a whole major, like, it's pretty strict law, and the council manages that process, or Workplace New Zealand, if it's a where somebody works, manages that process. I tried to go down Workplace New Zealand because I was trying everything, and wasn't quite successful, but we may have a window of opportunity if contractors come onto the property. Then it becomes a workplace issue. So that's sort of parked up on the side, and the council are now responsible for the asbestos management plan. Well, when they started pulling the windows out, putting holes in the wall, breaking doors down, and there's asbestos, they have literally poisoned the ground and poisoned the farm with asbestos. So prior to, the police officer, the local police officer marched my auntie off her home because there was a court order to evict, because there was a bailiff there. I rang up the police to ask them to march the contractors and the security guards and everyone off the property and literally put those yellow bands around it for no one to go in there. And the police that I spoke to wouldn't do that. But the police officer, so I got my auntie to do her thing because she knows the local police officer, and she made contact with the local police officer who rang me. And I was getting pushback, and I says, this is a health and safety issue. We don't know if there's asbestos in there. They have acted unlawfully, and they have started to demolish, and now, because of the demolition that they've done, they've actually poisoned the property and put everybody at risk. So whilst the asbestos, my auntie was in there for all her life. I mean, if you don't do any renovations or anything, the asbestos is going to stay in the walls, but it still is risky. The fact that they arrogantly and unlawfully started demolishing both the homestead and the wharepuni, they literally shook up all that asbestos, and now it's a hazard site.
Asbestos is neutral until it is, as you say, cut into, and that releases these fine particles of dust. So all of those contractors and the bailiff and the police who were there, they all will have breathed in asbestos dust. All of them will have done harm to themselves while doing harm to others illegally, unlawfully. It's just shocking. So this means, though, that it has to now be inspected and a proper plan put in place for dealing with it. So that should shut it down, unless we have some thugs who try to go in under cover of darkness, as they've done with trees. I know that in Auckland, beautiful 170-year-old trees, a gorgeous pohutukawa in going at Kaipa Pass area, was cut down in the night. This sneaky, just somebody who's acting lawfully doesn't have to do this in the middle of the night. But if you did this Friday, let it be known, you will harm yourselves. And it doesn't matter even if you've got the mask on and everything. You get it through your skin. You get it through the pores of your skin. Asbestos is such a fine dust. So if you do this to this whare without any due process being observed for money, you will end up being really sick. So don't do it. That's what I'm saying, Donna.
Yes.
People who are coming in.
Yes. So we do want to occupy, and I believe there was whānau there, but the whānau will have to remove themselves away from the whare because the whare now is a hazard site because of the illegal demolition that happened on Thursday. And so it's just, you're right, it's the arrogance, it's the lack of respect. So they used the law, but they didn't follow the law. If you know, they used the law to get my auntie out, but they didn't follow the due process, and now they've created a hazard and potential harm for our kaumātua, potential harm for the rest of the whānau and the farmer, because he milks cows that he sells back to us.
Oh,
so are those
John.
cows at risk now because of this? So it's a major issue. Now, that was the only reason that story that I shared with the local police officer was the only reason why he acted. Then he said, where are your lawyers? You know, speak to the lawyers. And I said, no, you go and speak to Susan Hugh, QC, who's representing this trust, and you ask her, where is the demolition order for asbestos, the management plan for asbestos, and where's the demolition order from Heritage New Zealand? And I says, and if she doesn't have one, I said, then her clients are acting unlawfully. I rang the lawyer because, like I say, yesterday was a busy day. I was ringing every organisation, anyone and everyone. I spoke to Susan Hugh, and I put her on notice. And I says, you now have to advise your clients and instruct them to stop demolishing the homestead and the wharepuni, because it is now a hazard and they do not have any resource consent from Heritage New Zealand.
And she's Susan H-E-W, Susan Hugh, is she? H-E-W or H-U-G-H?
No, H-U-G-H-E-S.
H-U-G-H-E-S. Great, because I think, Donna, that might be one way in, that everybody who's watching this, who's feeling as angry as I feel, hearing yet another injustice, yet another overriding of human rights and principled action under the law, let's all write an email to Susan Hughes. So we'll put her email up after this. Brilliant. And that way it's a centralized point, and she can feed that back to her clients and say, there's a lot of public opposition now to what you're doing, which means there are a lot of public eyeballs on what you're doing. And I, as a lawyer, do not want to advise you to do illegal acts, because that's going to make me as a QC look very, very bad. So that's one way we can take some action.
Yes, thank you.
What other ways can Kiwis, Pakeha, Māori Kiwis, Chinese Kiwis, Indian Kiwis, whoever is like, I don't want any more of these illegal actions happening. I want the rule of law to be upheld. This issue matters to all of us. What can we all do, Donna? What else can we do to help?
I think we have to hold our judiciary to account, because I was stonewalled with the registrar of the court, because there was an affidavit that wasn't signed, and the person who did the affidavit up is in hospital, and the in-house JP wasn't available, so we couldn't get that part signed. So I tried to file, as you do. I try and do most things because lawyers aren't cheap as well. So we're trying to keep the cost down. They stonewalled me, and in the end, I had to go back to the lawyers and say, they've stonewalled me. Can you file the injunction? And so
what was their reason for blocking you? What was the excuse?
That there wasn't the affidavit wasn't signed and witnessed by a JP or a registrar of the High Court. So they said normally lawyers, if that's happening, and because he was in hospital and been in hospital for 4 weeks now, it's hard for him to go out. He had to wait for their in-house JP that wasn't available. They were in Hawara, and the person who wrote the affidavit who happens to be my father. So I'm going to share this story. He is my father, and he was fighting for his life a few weeks ago. And I'm gonna carry on with this story because it's not the story that we're talking about, but it's relevant to our freedom and our rights and vaccine injured. So my father got vaccine injured after the second jab, and he got myocarditis. I had two medical practitioners from the hospital that said it was myocarditis. The technician that did the echo scan that I had to demand, it wasn't offered, and also his diabetic nurse that he's had for many, many years identified and said, yes, this is inflamed and he's got myocarditis. The consultant, which is the senior doctor, said it's not, it's a failing heart. And I said, myocarditis is a failing heart. So that happened on his second jab. And then the boosters come about.
Well, I was just going to ask you, what was the temporal connection between him getting that second jab and the myocarditis flaring up? Was it quite a close number of days or weeks? Could you identify?
I think it was literally days after he got the second jab.
I just say that because so many of these specialists and people who seem to be paid off in our hospitals, there's corruption everywhere in New Zealand at the moment.
That's right. This consultant says that because my father's had diabetes for half of his life, blamed it on his diabetes.
Yeah. They first seem to look for any possible other medical thing you might have in your history, and then they go, it'll be that, it'll be that. It can't be the jab. And I don't know why a doctor would do that, because the first thing a good doctor would do is say, how many days since your jab? Well, I'm now getting 50 people in who within days are getting flare-ups of things. This is starting to not look good. Instead, they're telling Kiwis, oh, it won't be the jab. It absolutely isn't the jab. It must be something else. There's no due diligence in our hospitals. Anyway, let's get back to the story.
No, there's not. And so I challenged the doctor, and then a week later, so he presented himself 4 times within weeks at A&E. He was sent home 3 times. The 4th time they put him in, and at that time we were in lockdown and only one person could go in, and it was my mother was next of kin naturally, but she has onset dementia, and so she's not an advocate. My whānau rang me up to tell me my father was in hospital, so I shot down, and they said, well, don't bother coming down because I'm not going to let you in. And well, you know me, the daughter bear come out. It took me 3 hours, but I didn't get in the end.
You're extra. I have to meet you in person, Donna. You're my kind of woman. We could change the world, I think, you and I.
and well, then they were going to release him from hospital. He was still unwell. And I said, no, I demanded an echo scan. So they did. I said, my father's not leaving this hospital. You're going to have to drag us out if you don't give me give him an echo scan. And it's the echo scan that showed up half his heart was inflamed with myocarditis.
That's so important. So many people who have been given wrong diagnoses then can demand an echo scan. An echo scan. Okay.
So and I demanded it, and you've got to be quite stroppy with them because otherwise, they didn't want to do it.
It almost feels as if they've had instructions not to do too much examination from this government.
That's right.
Don't do
right.
it. Then the numbers won't be there because we won't record it as a jab injury. It's very cynical. If you go down that route, you think, what kind of inhumane group of humans could order that kind of policy? But it seems to be being carried out in the hospitals. That's the evidence. So your father then found out that it was caused by this. Did they admit then, even this specialist, that it was the jab?
No, they blamed the diabetes. They blamed his diabetes. But what had happened, I think, was a week or 2 later, the consultant called a whānau hui, and I had my siblings from Australia zoom in to that hui, and pretty much they washed his hands of Dad's heart. So they said, there's nothing more we can do with his heart. We're going to manage his diabetes. We can't do anything more. His heart's going to continue to fail until such time as it stops. Pretty much is what they told us.
Donna,
Mm.
this is this government's legacy. Oh, you did the jab trusting us. We said it was safe and effective. It hasn't been safe. It's not effective. It hasn't been safe for you. You're damaged. We've got no protocols in place. Now you're on your own. Person after person that I interviewed. It's what I get.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. And then Dad ended up getting the booster. Now Dad has to go to the renal unit on a weekly basis because of his diabetes at the hospital. And so I can't confirm, but I believe that he was probably put under a lot of pressure to get the booster to be able to walk freely through the hospital.
Oh my God, that would add up with a lot of evidence I've collected too. They're saying to women who've just had babies, you can have your booster now. They're putting pressure on our most vulnerable, on our old, it's just horrendous. People who are not in a position to make clear, rational decisions on the basis of fully informed consent.
Well, my father relies on the renal unit to stay alive. And these people care for him. So I believe, and another sibling of mine believed that he was put under medical pressure to get the booster. And again, you know, the advertising that says protect your whakapapa. So he thinks he's protecting his whakapapa, even though he understands that there was an injury with the second jab. I don't really know what was going on in Dad's mind, to be honest, but it goes to show, I'm getting a little bit emotional, it goes to show how absolutely vulnerable they are. And so he got the booster. He ended up in hospital fighting for his life.
Donna.
And he's still in hospital fighting for his life. As soon as I walked in, so me and my husband travelled from Kirikiri, Royal Hamilton, to New Plymouth, to Taranaki Base Hospital in New Plymouth. As soon as I walked in, the doctors were there, and they turned around and they said to me, "Oh, your father's in hospital because he tested positive to COVID-19, and so COVID has brought him into hospital." And I said to them, instantly, I got my back up instantly as I walked through the door while my father was fighting for his life. And I said to him, he also got his booster.
Well, that's the question.
I said, yeah. I said he also got his booster and he was vaccinated with myocarditis, and you'll see on your record from his second vaccination. So I said the reason why he's in here is because of his booster. They looked at me, they got such a shock because it's like they're trained to you know, this is their narrative. This is their narrative, and this is what they're going to say to the whānau. As soon as I said that, I tell you what, no doctor after that said that this was because of COVID. It was the nurses that started pushing that same narrative.
My God, what has happened to our medical ethics? What has happened to the ethics of all these hospital doctors and nurses? Are they brainwashed? Are they aware they're brainwashed? Are they just straight out liars? Are they being paid for each? It's what's going on.
So with my father, and I lived in the hospital with him. He needed 24-hour care, and I don't trust the health system.
No.
Māori data and statistics show that the health system wasn't working for us prior to all of this happening. You know, prior to the lockdowns prior to the original COVID hitting our shores. But now with all of this, I definitely have no trust in the health system, but I was conscious that these people are caring for my father. So I had to be very careful about what I said. And to be honest, in regards to the care he got and he's receiving, he's receiving really good care. Is it because the whānau are there and he's receiving the care? So what I found out, when he first went into hospital, the whānau said, oh, he's all right, he can't breathe, and you know, there are problems. Now, when I got there, he had ulcers in his mouth, thrush in his mouth, ulcers and thrush going down his throat, and probably in his esophagus and his puku. So if it's all of that, then it's probably there. I did research, and I've been doing research for 2 years now on vaccine injuries and adverse effects and adverse reactions to the vaccine, to the Pfizer vaccine. And thrush and ulcer in the mouth is one of the adverse effects of the vaccine. Not only that, he had all the symptoms of pericarditis. Now, and the doctors were saying, it's not pericarditis, it's not pericarditis. I said, have you done the test? You haven't done the test. And what they said, it was pleurisy. So it's exactly the same as the heart, but around the lining of the lungs, that they said. And because it's around the lining of the lungs, it feels like it's pericarditis, but it's actually pleurisy. My father knew his heart was playing up on him.
Yes.
So what they did is, and I says, are you managing him or are you treating him? And this is really important for whānau to understand. When the first week he was there, they were managing him. Now, he didn't eat, he didn't drink. When I got there, he was dehydrated. Now, nutrition is so important. If we're fighting something, we have to ensure that we're getting the right nutrition.
Absolutely.
Well, he was dehydrated, and I said to them, why have you not put him on the drip? Why are you not feeding him through the drip or getting nutrition into him somehow? And they said, oh, we're trying to take the fluid off because he's a diabetic and there's fluid around his heart, fluid around his lungs. And I said, but if he doesn't have nutrition, then he's going to struggle.
He's got no energy to fight it. It's like having a war inside your body, and the little soldiers are stick thin. They've got nothing to actually get the energy to fight.
No armor. No. So I felt that they were managing his on. I believe, and it's my personal opinion, and I'm only speaking for myself, not my mother or my siblings or the nieces and nephews or the mokopuna, but I believe they were managing his death.
Oh, Donna.
They were just managing him out.
That's a kind of eugenics. That's a kind of it's what has happened to our country, Donna, what has happened to the decency that Kiwis used to hold so near and dear to all our hearts. We were a proud people of being decent. We were brave. The haka that the All Blacks do, I can't even watch that. Not one All Black has spoken up. And I know some of them have jab injured family members. And I can't watch them do the haka now because there's no courage. Not one of them has gone past the PR machine of the All Blacks and said, well, tell the goddamn truth. Tell the truth is an act of courage. Stand up when you know you should is an act of courage. It's a moral courage to stand by your truth no matter what comes back at you. The abuse from mainstream media, the abuse from anybody. If you know you're telling your truth. And the opposite is, when you walked into that hospital, you knew those doctors were telling you a lie. And your puku, your gut said, it's a lie, and I'm going to call it out. And that's what I do, Donna. I just try to call out the lies that are everywhere. But it's this energy of real Kiwi males and females standing up and saying, I'm not putting up with this anymore. I'm not putting up with the few corrupt manipulating and misleading and lying to all of us. I'm not putting up with it. I'm going to tell the truth.
Well, for me, I was in two minds because I knew these people were caring for him 24 hours a day. And my whānau were going up all the time because we had to change his. He's on dialysis, which is a bag. And one, we didn't want to wear.
It's just frozen a little bit.
The nurses out because it takes over half an hour. Oh, sorry. I've just had to, so we might have just frozen. Sorry.
It did, just momentarily. But you were saying, you know, he's on this bag. He's got the dialysis. He needs the medical help, and they are doing the medical help for that. Are they?
Yes.
The question is, are they brainwashed themselves? Do they believe in this? I don't know.
Yeah, there were some nurses that I was talking to, and I said to my husband, because my husband's sitting there and he can hear it all, and he says, he doesn't say much. You'll meet him. He's very quiet, but he shakes his head. And
they're the wise ones. It's all inside here, and they know what's going on. I have a partner like that.
Yeah. And he says, I think they believe what they're telling you. And I said, I think so too.
Interesting. So Donna, will you keep us up to date with how that goes with your father? I actually, for the ulcers, are they still bad? Are they still very bad?
No. So he is a lot better. He is into his 4th week. He is a lot better. The ulcers are gone, which means he can eat now. And it was part of the reason why he couldn't eat. It's because he had ulcer that was painful. The interesting story about connecting Dad back to the homestead is that Dad's a trustee on the trust, and he's the kaumātua on the trust. He's been there quite a long time, and he's also the kaumātua for the homestead, and so he's tried to work really hard for many years to try and bring.
Again, we're just losing
the trust and the whānau together. And sorry.
We might be losing the data a little bit. I suspect where you are, which I know is Murupara, a lot of other people might be draining it now because we got up early to do this interview.
Yes. Just the final thing, with my dad to connect it back to the homestead. He's a trustee, and they put him on his name on the eviction notice. He wasn't aware of the eviction. He wasn't aware of the demolition. And now in the Māori Land Court, we sent a letter into the trust so you're jointly and severally responsible. And liable, responsible and liable. And I advised Dad to send a letter to the trust to say you don't agree with the demolition, you don't agree with the eviction and the removal of his cousin, Dad's cousin. I said, you have to do that. Otherwise, if they make a decision, you're part of that decision making. Thank goodness I advised him to do that, because that's going to save Dad. But they still put Dad's name as a trustee in kaumātua onto the eviction notice. And he wasn't even aware, one, that they were going to start demolishing, and two, that they were going to evict his cousin, the first cousin.
Which shows the spirit of wairua, of the opposite of honourable. You don't do that if you're acting honourably. You don't do that.
No.
So do you need people there this weekend, Donna, around the house? I know they can't get too near because of the asbestos issue, but do you need them fronting the land?
Well, because I don't trust. Because they've acted unlawfully thus far, whānau and trustees have acted unlawfully thus far. I don't trust that they're going to protect this taonga. Now, while we were talking, my aunties tried to ring me twice. So obviously something has gone down, Liz. And I'm unaware of what that is for her to ring twice. Normally she'll message me to give me an update. So that must mean that I'm assuming that they're back there. They're back at the homestead. Wow. They're going to start demolishing. So even though, so that's what I mean, there's the injunction, there's the Heritage New Zealand, but unless we have people protecting it, or the police protecting it, which obviously they're not, because now the police said, oh, I'm not going up there because of the asbestos. And I said, well, people need to be marched off that property. It's a health hazard. So my auntie's rung through twice, and she normally messages me. So that's telling me something's going down. So absolutely need help.
We need help. So I was just looking into my diary. Today is what, the 30th? It's the Saturday, the 30th, I think it is, of April. So what we need is this Saturday, we need everybody in that Taranaki, that wider Taranaki region, anybody even from Hamilton, from the Waikato, who can go down and help to front this land. Where is the land, Donna, and how do people find it?
It's in Pihama. So Pihama is just outside of Upanaki.
Yes.
And I've got the physical address. I think the physical address is 32 Upanaki Road. But
that's what I needed. Yes, because you were explaining it's outside Upanaki, but it's
So you've got, there's the Odi River and the Odi Bridge.
Yes.
So you make your way as you're going around the coast. You make your way over the Odi Bridge and the Odi River. Our farm backs onto the Odi River. So the first homestead you see from the Odi River is our homestead, and it's on the right-hand side if you're coming from New Plymouth, and on the left-hand side if you're coming from Hawera.
Great. And we need just whatever photographs you can send me, and we will edit this up now. First thing, Donna Pokere-Phillips, it has been an honor to talk to you, you brave, fearless mama and daughter bear, wahine. I've loved the quality of the kōrero, but there are such important things in here. Do people contact you or any of your team directly if you need other help? If you think they have things to offer you, who can they contact in the team?
Yes. Yes. So my mobile is 027 602 5011. But if they private message me on my Donna Pokere-Phillips Facebook page as well, then I've got a record, because I'm in a as you know, I'm in a all weekend hui this weekend, and then after that hui, I haven't spoken to my husband, but in my mind's eye, we're heading to Taranaki.
Yes.
I haven't had that discussion.
I could hear him in the background supporting you, and I look forward to meeting you both. Thank you so much, Donna, and good luck with the hui. And please, Kiwis, anybody in the Taranaki area, get up, particularly today, tonight, and tomorrow. It'll be a communal thing. It'll be a whānau thing, a family thing, where we stand up for the rule of law. It's an issue for all of us as well. Thank you, Donna. Keep me up to date. Kia ora.
I will.
Kia ora, my friend.